Most of humanity lives in a state of perpetual waiting. They wait for conditions to change, for circumstances to improve, for others to recognize their worth, for the external world to somehow magically rearrange itself to match their desires. But I tell you now with complete certainty born of experience that this waiting is the very thing that keeps you bound to your present limitations. The external world is nothing more than a reflection of your internal states of consciousness. And until you learn to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, that external world will continue to mirror back to you exactly what you have always been. The art of assumption is the most practical thing in the world. It is not mysticism, though it may seem mystical to those who have never practiced it. It is not magic, though its results may appear magical to those who witness them. It is simply the natural law of consciousness operating through the medium of human imagination. When you truly understand what it means to assume your new identity, when you actually feel yourself to be what you desire to be, the whole vast world must reshape itself to confirm your assumption. But let me be clear about what assumption really means. For this word has been so diluted by casual usage that its true power has been forgotten. To assume is not to pretend. To assume is not to hope or wish or desire. To assume is to actually take upon yourself the mental and emotional state of already being what you want to be. It is to feel so completely identified with your desired state that there is no longer any sense of separation between you and it. When you have truly assumed your new identity, you do not think about it. You do not work toward it. You do not hope for it. You simply are it. This is where most people fail in their attempts to transform their lives. They try to assume while still maintaining their old identity. They attempt to feel wealthy while still feeling poor, to feel loved while still feeling rejected, to feel successful while still carrying the consciousness of failure. This creates an internal contradiction that cancels out the power of assumption. You cannot assume your new identity while holding on to your old one. The assumption of the new must be so complete that the old simply ceases to exist in your consciousness. The foundation of all successful assumption lies in understanding that consciousness is the only reality. Everything you see, everything you experience, everything that appears to have solid existence in the world around you is nothing more than consciousness pushed out into manifestation. Your body, your environment, your relationships, your circumstances, all of these are simply external reflections of states of consciousness that you have assumed, either consciously or unconsciously, either deliberately or by default. When you begin to grasp this truth, you realize that changing your external conditions is not a matter of manipulating the world around you. It is a matter of changing the consciousness from which you are operating. And the way you change consciousness is through the disciplined practice of assumption. You must learn to feel yourself into the state of being that corresponds to your fulfilled desire. And you must maintain that feeling with such consistency and intensity that it becomes your natural state of being. The secret lies in understanding that your imagination is not separate from reality. Your imagination is the creative power of God operating through you. When you imagine yourself to be what you desire to be, when you feel it so vividly that it becomes real to you, you are not engaging in fantasy. You are engaging in the fundamental creative act by which all things come into existence. Everything that exists was first imagined. Everything that you see in the world around you was once nothing more than an imaginable act in someone's consciousness. But imagination without feeling is powerless. You can imagine yourself wealthy 1,000 times. But if you do not feel wealthy, if you do not assume the emotional state of wealth, your imagination remains barren. The feeling is the secret. The feeling is what breathes life into your imaginal act and transforms it from mere fantasy into creative power. When you can imagine yourself in possession of your desire and feel the reality of that possession, you have set in motion the forces that must inevitably bring that desire into manifestation. This is why I emphasize again and again the importance of living from the end. Do not live in hope of your desire's fulfillment. Do not live in expectation of its coming. Live from the assumption that it is already yours. Live from the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you live from the end, you collapse time. You bring the future into the present moment and make it your current reality. The external world may take time to catch up with your assumption, but in consciousness, the transformation is instantaneous. Let me tell you exactly how to practice this art of assumption. First, you must become very clear about what you want to be. Not what you want to have, not what you want to do, but what you want to be. For being is the foundation of having and doing. If you want wealth, You must assume the identity of a wealthy person. If you want love, you must assume the identity of a person who is deeply loved. If you want success, you must assume the identity of a successful person. The having and the doing will follow naturally from the being. Once you have identified the identity you wish to assume, you must construct a scene that would imply the fulfillment of your desire. This scene should be simple, natural, and involve some action on your part. If you wish to assume the identity of a successful business owner, you might construct a scene where you are signing an important contract or addressing your employees. If you wish to assume the identity of a happily married person, you might construct a scene where you are wearing a wedding ring and someone is congratulating you on your marriage. The key to making your scene effective is to make it sensory vivid. You must see what you would see, hear what you would hear, feel what you would feel if your desire were already fulfilled. But most importantly, you must capture the feeling of fulfillment. You must feel the satisfaction, the joy, the sense of completion that would be yours if your desire were already realized. This feeling is the soul of your assumption, and without it, your technique becomes nothing more than empty mental exercise. Now comes the discipline that separates those who succeed from those who fail. You must return to this scene again and again, particularly in that drowsy state just before sleep when your conscious mind relaxes its guard and your subconscious becomes most receptive to impression. Night after night, you must feel yourself into this scene until it becomes more real to you than your present circumstances. You must persist in this assumption until it becomes your natural state of consciousness. This persistence is absolutely crucial, for your subconscious mind is habituated to your old identity. It has been maintaining your current reality for years, perhaps decades, and it will not easily surrender its familiar patterns. You must be more persistent in assuming your new identity than your subconscious is in maintaining your old one. You must return to the feeling of your wish fulfilled with such consistency and intensity that your subconscious has no choice but to accept it as your new reality. During this period of gestation, you may find that your external circumstances seem to contradict your assumption. You may be assuming wealth while your bank account remains empty. You may be assuming love while you remain alone. You may be assuming success while you face apparent failure. This is the test of your faith, the trial of your assumption. You must not let appearances shake your conviction. You must remember that the external world is always the last to change, and you must maintain your assumption regardless what your senses report. This is where most people abandon their assumption. They allow the evidence of their senses to override the testimony of their imagination. They forget that consciousness is the only reality and that all external conditions are simply shadows cast by their states of consciousness. They return to their old identity because it seems more real, more solid, more supported by evidence. But I tell you that the evidence of your senses is the least reliable guide to truth. Your senses can only report what has already been created by consciousness. They cannot reveal what consciousness is in the process of creating. The man or woman who would successfully assume a new identity must learn to live by faith rather than by sight. Faith is not belief in the impossible. Faith is loyalty to your unseen reality. It is fidelity to your assumption despite all appearances to the contrary. When you have faith in your assumption, when you remain loyal to your new identity, regardless of what your present circumstances may suggest, you demonstrate the quality of consciousness that inevitably manifests as change conditions. But let me address a common misunderstanding about assumption. Some believe that to assume effectively, they must deny present circumstances or pretend that their current problems do not exist. This is not true assumption. True assumption does not require you to deny any facts. It requires you to transcend them. You can acknowledge your present circumstances while simultaneously assuming your new identity. The key is to give greater reality to your assumption than to your present conditions. Think of it this way. An actor on stage may be playing the role of a king, but he does not deny that he is actually a common man. He simply gives greater reality to his role than to his personal circumstances for the duration of the performance. In the same way, you can acknowledge your present circumstances while giving greater reality to your assumed identity. You live from your assumption while passing through your present conditions. The power of assumption becomes even more evident when you understand that you are always assuming something. Every moment of every day, you are maintaining some identity, some sense of who and what you are. The question is not whether you will assume, but what you will assume. Most people assume by default. They accept the identity that has been given to them by their circumstances, their upbringing, their past experiences. They assume limitation because limitation has been their experience. They assume lack because lack has been their reality. But you have the power to assume by design. You can consciously choose the identity you wish to embody. You can deliberately select the state of consciousness from which you wish to operate. This is your divine prerogative, your God-like power. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not bound by your past. You are not limited by what others believe about you, but what you have believed about yourself. You are the operant power in your world, and assumption is your method of operation. When you begin to assume consciously and deliberately, you discover that the world is far more malleable than you ever imagined. People change their attitude toward you. Opportunities appear where none existed before. Resources become available that were previously beyond your reach. The very fabric of your reality reshapes itself to accommodate your new assumption. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is the natural law of consciousness manifesting through your assumption. But remember that assumption is an art that requires practice. Like any skill, it improves with repetition. Your first attempts may feel awkward, artificial, unnatural. This is normal. You have been assuming your old identity for so long that it feels natural, while your new assumption feels foreign. But persist in your practice. Continue to return to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Day by day, your new assumption will become more natural, more automatic, more spontaneous. As you persist in your assumption, you will notice subtle changes beginning to occur. Your thoughts will begin to align with your new identity. Your words will begin to reflect your assumed state. Your actions will begin to flow from your new consciousness. You will find yourself naturally behaving as the person you have assumed yourself to be. This is the beginning of manifestation, the first sign that your assumption is taking root in your consciousness. The more completely you assume your new identity, the more quickly it will manifest in your experience. Half-hearted assumption produces half-hearted results. Occasional assumption produces occasional results. But complete, persistent, unwavering assumption produces inevitable results. When you assume so completely that you no longer think of yourself as assuming, when your new identity becomes so natural that you forget you ever were anything else, manifestation becomes automatic. This is the state of consciousness that I call living from the wish fulfilled. You are no longer working toward your desire. You are no longer hoping for its fulfillment. You are living as though it is already yours, because in consciousness it is already yours. This is the end of struggle, the end of effort, the end of trying to make things happen. When you live from the wish fulfilled, things happen through you rather than by you. Many people resist this teaching because it seems to place all responsibility on their shoulders. They prefer to believe that their circumstances are beyond their control, that they are victims of forces larger than themselves. But I tell you that this responsibility is not a burden. It is the greatest gift you could ever receive. It means that you are not powerless. It means that you are not dependent on others for your happiness, your success, your fulfillment. It means that you have within yourself the power to create any life you can imagine. The moment you truly accept this responsibility, the moment you fully embrace your power as the operant consciousness in your world, everything changes. You stop looking outside yourself for salvation. You stop waiting for conditions to improve. You stop hoping that others will change. You turn within and begin the work of assumption, the work of becoming who you want to be rather than remaining who you have been. This work of assumption is not always easy, but it is always simple. It requires no special knowledge, no particular talent, no external resources. It requires only your willingness to feel yourself into the state of your fulfilled desire and to persist in that feeling until it becomes your natural state of consciousness. Every person has this ability. Every person can learn this art. The only question is whether you will have the persistence to practice it until it becomes second nature. The transformation that assumption can produce in your life is beyond anything you can currently imagine. I have seen the poorest become wealthy, the loneliest find love. The sickest become healthy, the most unsuccessful achieve their greatest dreams. I have witnessed these transformations not once or twice, but hundreds of times in the lives of ordinary people who learn to assume extraordinary identities. But perhaps more importantly, I have experienced this transformation in my own life. I have proven the power of assumption not just in theory but in practice. I have lived from the wish fulfilled and watched as my entire world rearranged itself to match my assumption. This is not something I believe. This is something I know. This is something I have lived. And now I pass this knowledge to you, not as mere information, but as living truth. You have within you the same power that has created every great achievement in human history. You have within you the same consciousness that has manifested every beautiful thing you have ever admired. The only difference between you and those who have achieved what you desire is that they learn to assume the identity of achievement. While you have continued to assume the identity of limitation, tonight I challenge you to begin the practice of assumption. Choose the identity you wish to embody. Construct the scene that implies its fulfillment. Feel yourself into that scene with all the vividness and intensity you can muster. Return to it again and again until it becomes more real to you than your present circumstances. Persist in this assumption until it becomes your natural state of consciousness. Do not be discouraged if results do not appear immediately. Remember that consciousness is like a garden. You plant the seed of your assumption. You water it with persistent feeling and you wait for it to bear fruit. Some seeds sprout quickly, others take longer to germinate. But if you maintain the proper conditions, if you continue to nourish your assumption with feeling, if you protect it from the weeds of doubt and fear, it will inevitably manifest in your experience. The law of assumption is impersonal. It works for everyone who applies it correctly, regardless of their background, their education, their circumstances, their past failures or successes. It is not a reward for the good or a punishment for the bad. It is simply the way consciousness operates. When you assume something to be true about yourself, consciousness has no choice but to manifest evidence of that assumption in your experience. This means that you are always demonstrating the law, whether you know it or not. Your present circumstances are the perfect reflection of what you have been assuming about yourself, consciously or unconsciously. If you do not like your present circumstances, do not blame others or fate or chance. Look within and ask yourself what you have been assuming. What identity have you been maintaining? What feeling have you been carrying about yourself in your life? When you identify the assumption that has been creating your unwanted circumstances, you can immediately begin to change it. You can consciously choose a new assumption, a new identity, a new feeling about yourself. This is your power, your prerogative, your divine inheritance. You are not bound by what you have been. You are free to become what you choose to be. The time for transformation is now, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, not when you feel more confident or more prepared. Now, this very moment, you can begin to assume the identity you desire. This very moment, you can begin to feel yourself to be what you want to be. This very moment, you can begin to live from the wish fulfilled. Remember that assumption is not a one-time event, but a way of life. It is not something you do occasionally when you want something specific. It is something you do constantly, moment by moment, day by day. You are always assuming something about yourself. The question is whether you will assume consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or by default. Choose to assume consciously. Choose to assume deliberately. Choose to assume the highest and best that you can imagine for yourself. Do not settle for mediocrity when greatness is available to you. Do not accept limitation when freedom is your birthright. Do not remain in lack when abundance is the natural state of consciousness. Your new identity awaits your assumption. Your fulfilled desire awaits your feeling. Your transformed life awaits your persistence. All the power you need is already within you. All the knowledge you require has been given to you tonight. The only thing that remains is your decision to apply what you have learned. Will you continue to live from your old identity, or will you assume your new one? Will you continue to hope and wish and want, or will you begin to live from the wish fulfilled? Will you remain bound by appearances, or will you exercise your power as the operant consciousness in your world? The choice is yours, and it is a choice you must make not once, but every moment of every day. Each time you think about yourself, each time you feel into your identity, each time you assume something about your nature and your life, you are choosing who you will be and what you will experience. Choose wisely. Choose boldly. Choose with the full knowledge that you are the creator of your own experience, the author of your own story, the artist of your own life. Assume the identity that will create the life you truly desire. Feel yourself to be what you want to be. Live from the wish fulfilled. This is the great secret, the ultimate truth, the final revelation. You are not who you think you are. You are who you assume yourself to be. Change your assumption and you change your world. Assume your new identity and watch as everything in your life transforms to match that assumption. The power is yours. The choice is yours. The time is now. Assume your new identity and live from thee fulfilled. For this is your destiny, your purpose, your divine calling. This is the way to freedom, to fulfillment, to the complete realization of your infinite potential. Go forth and assume. Go forth and feel. Go forth and live from the end. Your new life begins the moment you truly embrace your new identity. Your transformation begins the moment you feel yourself to be what you have always wanted to be. Your wish is fulfilled the moment you assume that it is. This is the truth that sets you free. This is the knowledge that transforms your world. This is the power that makes all things possible. Use it wisely. Use it persistently. Use it with a complete conviction that consciousness is the only reality and that assumption is your created power. Your new identity awaits. Your wish fulfilled beckons. Your transformed life calls to you from the dimension of consciousness where it already exists in perfect completion. Step into that consciousness. Assume that identity. Live from that fulfillment. This is your birthright, your power, your destiny. The law is simple. The practice is clear. The results are inevitable. Assume your new identity and live from the wish fulfilled. For in the realm of consciousness, all things are possible to him who believes. And believing is simply assuming that what you desire is already yours in the only reality that truly matters, the reality of consciousness itself. Consider this fundamental truth. Your consciousness is the only reality. Everything you perceive outside yourself is simply consciousness externalized. Your conversations, your arguments, your constant need to discuss and analyze your desires with others. These are all forms of diffusing the concentrated power of your imagination. When you speak of your desires before they are manifested, you scatter the seeds of creation to the wind rather than planting them firmly in the soil of consciousness. I knew a gentleman in New York, a brilliant businessman by all external standards, who constantly struggled to bring his grandest visions into being. Despite his intellect and connections, his most cherished dreams remained elusive. One evening after one of my lectures, he approached me with frustration evident in his demeanor. "Wayne," he said, "I've visualized, I've affirmed, I've done everything you've suggested, yet my business expansion refuses to materialize. What am I missing?" I looked at him and asked a simple question. "To whom have you spoken about these plans?" His expression revealed the answer before his words confirmed it. "Well, I've discussed them with my partners, my wife, my colleagues. I've been gathering opinions to refine my approach." "There," I replied, "is the root of your failure to manifest. You have violated the principle of silence." I explained to him that the unmanifested state is like a delicate embryo in the womb of consciousness. Exposure to the harsh light of external discussion can cause it to dissolve before it has gathered sufficient strength to be born into objective experience. I advised him to cease all discussion of his plans and to commune only with his own wonderful human imagination, which is God himself creating in him. 3 months later, this same gentleman approached me after another lecture, his face illuminated with joy. Without speaking a word, he handed me a newspaper clipping announcing the very business expansion he had been attempting to manifest. "I told no one," he whispered. "I simply knew it was done." This, my dear friends, is the power of silence and manifestation. When you learn to steal the external conversations and the internal dialogue of doubt, you become aware of signs that your manifestation is moving from the realm of imagination into the world of thought. Let me explain the mechanics of this process. Every desire once conceived in imagination exists immediately as a spiritual reality. Your consciousness has already accepted it as complete in what I call the fourth dimension, the realm of spiritual completion. The journey of manifestation is not one of creating something new, but rather of allowing what already exists in spiritual form to clothe itself in the garments of physicality. This journey from spiritual conception to physical birth requires gestation. And just as an expectant mother does not need to announce her pregnancy immediately to every acquaintance, so too should you guard the sacred state of your unmanifested desires until they are ready to reveal themselves naturally. During this gestation period, if you maintain faithful silence, not an anxious waiting silence, but a confident knowing silence, you will begin to witness signs of your manifestation approaching. These signs are confirmations from the universe that the seed you have planted in consciousness is indeed growing, developing, and preparing to burst forth into your three-dimensional reality. What are these signs? They are synchronicities so perfect, so mathematically precise in their timing that they could not possibly be mere coincidence. They are overheard conversations that seem to speak directly to the desire you have been nurturing in private. There are unexpected opportunities that align perfectly with your inner vision. There are resources appearing just when needed, people entering your life who possess exactly the connections or skills required for your manifestation. I recall a young woman who attended my lectures in Los Angeles. She had been visualizing a very specific home of Spanish-style villa with a red tile roof, a courtyard with a fountain and citrus trees in the garden. The price of such a home far exceeded her current financial means. But she faithfully applied the law of assumption, feeling the naturalness of owning such a home while maintaining complete silence about her desire. One afternoon, she found herself driving in an unfamiliar neighborhood due to a dead. As she rounded a corner, there stood the exact home she had been imagining in her mental scenes. Without thinking, she pulled over to admire it. An elderly gentleman was tending to the garden and, noticing her interest, approached her car. "Do you like this old place?" he asked. "It's beautiful," she replied, careful not to reveal the full extent of her recognition. The conversation that followed revealed that the man was preparing to sell the home, but dreaded dealing with real estate agents and open houses at his advanced age. He was looking for someone who would appreciate the home's character and history. Within weeks, through a series of events that can only be described as miraculous, the young woman arranged financing on terms that matched her budget precisely, and she acquired the home at a fraction of its market value. When she shared this story with me, she emphasized one crucial detail. I never told anyone what I was imagining, not even my closest friends. But once I began my mental work, I started seeing Spanish tiles everywhere. Magazine covers featuring similar homes appeared in my mailbox. Television programs suddenly showcased Spanish architecture. It was as though the entire universe was confirming that my assumption was being realized even before the physical home came into my experience. This, my dear friends, is the pattern of manifestation science that appears when one practices faithful silence. Your external reality begins to echo the contents of your consciousness in increasingly specific ways, building toward the complete externalization of your desire. Why does silence possess such power? The answer lies in understanding the nature of consciousness itself. Your consciousness is the only reality. I cannot emphasize this fundamental truth enough. What you are conscious of, you manifest. When you discuss your unmanifested desires, you become conscious of their absence, of the gap between your current state and your desired state. You focus awareness on the lack, not the fulfillment. Furthermore, the opinions and doubts of others become entangled with your pure vision. Their limited concepts of possibility infiltrate your consciousness, diluting the clarity of your assumption. Remember, the world is yourself pushed out. Others merely reflect back to you your own states of consciousness. If your consciousness is contaminated with doubt, the world will dutifully reflect that doubt back to you in countless ways. In silence, however, you maintain the purity of your vision. You commune directly with your own wonderful human imagination, which I remind you is God Himself in action within you. In this sacred silent communion, there is no contradiction, no doubt, no limitation imposed by conventional thinking. There is only the pure creative power of I am declaring what is true. Consider the wisdom in the biblical instruction, go tell no man. After healing the leper, Jesus commanded him to say nothing of what had occurred. Was this mere modesty on Jesus' part? No. It was a profound spiritual instruction related to the law of manifestation. The transformed state, the healed condition, needed to root itself firmly in consciousness before exposure to the doubts and contrary beliefs of others. Similarly, when Peter, James, John witnessed the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain, they were instructed to tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen from the dead. The vision that revealed spiritual reality required protection from the limiting beliefs of the unenlightened mind until it could fully manifest in the world of form. I urge you to adopt this same sacred silence regarding your own transformations and manifestations in progress. When you feel the naturalness of your desire fulfilled, seal it with silence. Know within yourself it is done. Then move through your days, alert but relaxed, watching for the signs of your manifestation approaching. The signs will come. They always do, for it is law. Not wishful thinking, not vague metaphysics, but immutable law, as exact as mathematics. Besides, follow the faithful practice of silence with the same certainty that day follows night. A gentleman once approached me after repeatedly failing to manifest a significant career advancement. I've been affirming my new position for months, he explained, but nothing has materialized. Upon questioning him further, I discovered that he had been discussing his techniques with colleagues, explaining to his wife each evening how he was using the law of assumption to secure the promotion, even journaling extensively about the process rather than the completion. I advised him to cease all discussion or analysis or focus on the how of his manifestation. Instead, I instructed him to capture the feeling of already occupying the new position, to fall asleep each night in that consciousness, and to remain completely silent about it to everyone. Within 3 weeks, he began noticing peculiar coincidences. His current supervisor was unexpectedly transferred to another department. A project suited to showcase his unique talents landed on his desk. A senior executive who had never spoken with him previously began engaging him in conversation in the elevator. He recognized these as manifestation signs, the bridge of incidents constructing itself to lead to his desired end. 2 months after embracing the practice of silence, he was called into the director's office and offered precisely the position he had been imagining at a salary exceeding his original assumption. The most revealing aspect, he later told me, was that during the meeting, the director used phrases that were almost identical to those I had been hearing in my own imagination. It was as though I had scripted the entire conversation in advance. Indeed, he had done exactly that, for in the silence of his focused imagination, he had planted the seed that grew into that precise experience. The science you witnessed along the way was simply the evidence of that seed breaking ground, sending up its first tender shoots toward physical manifestation. Now, my friends, let me address a question that may be forming in your minds. If silence is so crucial, how does one distinguish between the wise silence that nurtures manifestation and the fearful silence that stems from doubt or shame regarding one's desires? The distinction lies in your inner feeling state. The silence I advocate is not the tense silence of anxiety, wondering if your desire will manifest. It is not the embarrassed silence of one who fears ridicule for their ambitions. Rather, it is the peaceful, confident silence of one who knows that what they have assumed in consciousness is already accomplished in spiritual reality and must by law project itself into physical experience. This silence is suffused with gratitude. It is as natural as the silence of one who, having deposited $1 million in the bank, feels no need to repeatedly announce their wealth to others. The knowing is enough. The inner acknowledgement is complete. In this state of grateful knowing silence, you carry yourself with a quiet confidence that others may notice but cannot quite define. This itself becomes a sign of your manifestation in progress. This subtle shift in your bearing, this unshakable certainty that permeates your being. I recall a dear friend who had spent years struggling with financial scarcity. After attending my lectures, she began applying the principle of silence to her manifestation of abundance. Rather than continuing to discuss her financial difficulties with friends and family, as had been her habit, she assumed the consciousness of wealth and held her silence. She reported to me the remarkable shift that occurred, Wayne. Within days of my new practice, I began finding coins on the sidewalk. Pennies at first, then nickels, then dimes and quarters. A rebate check I had forgotten about arrived in the mail. A client who had owed me a small sum for months suddenly paid their invoice. These were small amounts, to be sure, but I recognized them as signs confirming my new state of consciousness. She continued her faithful silence, neither boasting of these initial signs nor discussing her practice. The signs accelerated. A distant relative sent her birthday gift of $500, something that had never occurred previously. She was offered a project at work that came with an unexpected bonus. A property she had invested in years earlier, which had been sitting stagnant in value, received a purchase offer well above market price. Within 6 months, her financial situation had transformed completely. The fascinating aspect of her story was that each manifestation sign seemed to be calibrated perfectly to her expanding capacity to accept abundance. The universe did not immediately drop $1 million in her lap, which might have overwhelmed her consciousness and been rejected as impossible. Instead, evidence of her shifting financial reality appeared in graduated steps. each one expanding her acceptance of prosperity until the full manifestation of abundance became her natural state. This pattern of graduated science is common in significant manifestations. The universe, which is really your own wonderful human imagination operating beyond your conscious awareness, knows exactly how to build the bridge of incident that will carry you from your present state to your desired state in the most natural manner. Your task is simply to maintain the assumption of the wish fulfilled and to honor that assumption with faithful silence, watching with alert interest as the signs multiply around you. Now, there is another dimension to this practice of silence that we must explore, the silencing of the internal voice of doubt and contradiction. For many, this inner voice is far more destructive to manifestation than any external discussion could ever be. You may refrain from speaking of your desires to others, yet maintain a running commentary within your mind that contradicts the very state you are attempting to assume. This internal argument must be silenced if your manifestation is to proceed unimpeded. Remember the biblical injunction, let the weak say, I am strong. Not I will be strong, not I am becoming strong, but I am strong. The full acknowledgement of the desired state is an accomplished fact. When the internal voice argues, but you are not strong, you are weak, true silence consists of gently but firmly refusing to entertain this contradiction. A useful practice is to respond to all internal doubts with a simple statement. That may be true in the world of shadows, but in the reality of my consciousness where creation actually occurs, I am precisely what I have assumed myself to be. Then return to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. This internal silence, this refusal to argue with your manifestation, creates a vacuum that must be filled. Nature abhors a vacuum, and into the quiet space created by your silence, doubts will flow fluvidance of your new reality. A distinguished physician who attended my lectures in San Francisco shared with me his experience with this practice. For years, he had struggled with an inner voice that constantly reminded him of his humble beginnings, suggesting he was an imposter in his profession, despite his credentials and accomplishments. After learning the principle of silence, he began systematically refusing to engage with these thoughts. Whenever the doubtful inner voice spoke, he would acknowledge it briefly, then firmly turn his attention to the consciousness of being an exceptional, confident physician, beloved by his patients and respected by his colleagues. The external signs were remarkable, he told me. Within weeks of adopting this practice of inner silence, I received an invitation to speak at a prestigious medical conference, something I had always desired but never been offered. A journal published an article I had submitted months earlier and had nearly forgotten about. Former patients began referring their friends and family to my practice in unprecedented numbers. The most striking sign, he continued, came when a senior colleague, who had always been somewhat cold toward me, stopped me in the hospital corridor and said, I don't know what's different about you lately, but your diagnostic insights have been exceptional. I find myself looking forward to our consultations. Nothing in my technical abilities had changed. What had changed was my consciousness, and the science confirmed that my inner silence was bearing fruit. This, my friends, is the pattern you will observe in your own life when you practice both external and internal silence regarding your manifestations. The science will come with increasing frequency and specificity, confirming that the seed planted in imagination is growing toward its inevitable expression in reality. Now, allow me to address another aspect of silence and manifestation science that is seldom discussed but tremendously important. There will be times in your practice when, despite your faithful silence and consistent assumption, the external world seems to move in precisely the opposite direction from your desire. This apparent contradiction is itself a manifestation sign of the highest order, though few recognize it as such. When your external reality appears to worsen after you have assumed your wish fulfilled, it is evidence that the old structure of your life is being dismantled to make way for the new. This is what the Bible refers to as the shaking of the foundations, the necessary reorganization of your affairs that must precede the establishment of your new state. I recall a woman who had applied the law to manifest a happy marriage after years of disappointment in relationships. Upon assuming the consciousness of being happily married to a loving, compatible partner, she maintained perfect goddess about her inner work. Within weeks, her current relationship, which had been stagnant but comfortable, suddenly dissolved in a series of unexpected conflicts. Her living situation changed abruptly, forcing a move. A job opportunity arose, requiring relocation to another city. Friends expressed concern, seeing only the apparent dissolution of her life stability. Had she broken her silence and engaged with their concerns, accepting their perspective of tragedy and loss, the bridge of incidents would have been interrupted. Instead, she recognized these dramatic changes as necessary components of her manifestation, the clearing away of structures that could not support her new state of consciousness. She maintained both her assumption and her silence, watching with alert interest as events unfolded. Within 6 months of this apparent collapse of her previous life, she had met and married a man who embodied every quality she had included in her assumption in circumstances that could never have manifested had her previous relationship, location, and employment remained intact. The lesson here is profound. The signs of your manifestation may include apparent setbacks that are in reality the perfect path toward your desires' fulfillment. In silence, you develop the wisdom to recognize these signs correctly, neither resisting them nor interpreting them as failure of your manifestation. This brings us to a critical understanding about the practice of silence and silence of manifestation science. The ultimate purpose of this practice is not merely to obtain the things or circumstances you desire, but to develop a direct first-hand knowledge of how creation works. It is to experience yourself as the creative power of the universe, to know yourself as God in action. Each time you maintain faithful silence and witness the signs of your manifestation unfolding in perfect order, you deepen this knowledge. It becomes not merely an intellectual concept, but a lived experience as real and undeniable as your own hand before your face. With each successful manifestation, your consciousness expands. What once seemed miraculous becomes natural. What once required careful practice becomes spontaneous. You move gradually from the consciousness of applying techniques to manifest desires to the consciousness of being the manifestation power itself, expressing naturally through all aspects of your life. Consider the development of any skill, playing the piano for instance. The beginner must consciously think about each note, each finger placement. With practice, the conscious effort diminishes until the accomplished pianist plays complex compositions without thought, the music flowing through them as a natural expression of their being. So it is with manifestation. The conscious application of technique, the deliberate assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the disciplined maintenance of silence eventually gives way to spontaneous creative expression. You no longer use the law. You experience yourself as the law in operation. The observation of manifestation signs plays a crucial role in this development. Each sign you recognize is confirmation not merely of your specific desires' progress, but of the broader truth of your creative nature. Each sign strengthens your conviction not in the law as something external to be applied, but in yourself as the created principle in expression. I knew a man who began his study of the law with small manifestations, parking spaces, unexpected sums of money, specific encounters. He practiced faithful silence and became adept at recognizing the signs that preceded each manifestation. As his confidence grew, he expanded his application to larger desires of specific home, a career advancement, the resolution of a long-standing family conflict. In each case, his recognition of the preliminary science strengthened his conviction in the inevitable fulfillment of his assumption. After several years of this practice, I noticed a profound shift in his demeanor and his reports of his experience. He no longer spoke of working to manifest specific desires. Instead, he described living in a state of continuous creation where his consciousness naturally expressed as harmonious conditions without deliberate effort. The most significant change, he told me, is that I no longer see manifestation signs as separate events pointing towards some future fulfillment. I now recognize that all of experience is a sign, a reflection of what I am conscious of being. The entire universe is a manifestation sign, responding precisely to my state of consciousness in each moment. This, my friends, is the higher understanding toward which our practice leads. The ultimate silence is not merely the disciplined non-discussion of specific desires. It is the tranquil mind that has transcended the need for external validation of its creative power. The ultimate recognition of science is not merely noticing synchronicities that precede manifestation. It is the direct perception of all experience as the immediate expression of consciousness. Now, some of you may wonder, if silence is so crucial to successful manifestation, how are we to understand the scriptural injunction to make your requests known unto God? Does this not imply that we should speak our desires? The resolution of this apparent contradiction lies in correctly identifying who or what God is. God is not an entity separate from yourself to whom requests must be communicated. God is your own wonderful human imagination. The speech that communicates with God is not verbal expression, but the language of feeling and assumption. You make your request known unto God by assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled, by experiencing in imagination the reality of your desire accomplished. This inner communication requires no words, no verbal or written expression. It is the direct impregnation of the subconscious through the medium of feeling. This is the true meaning of prayer. Not beseeching an external deity, but communing with the creative power of your own consciousness through the assumption of the reality of your desire. And this communion is most perfect when wrapped in golden silence, undisturbed by the contradictions of external discussion or internal doubt. Let me share with you a personal experience that illustrates this principle with particular clarity. Many years ago, before I fully understood the law as I now teach it, I desired to leave the island of Barbados and travel to the United States. The circumstances of my life at that time made such a journey seem impossible. I had no money, no connections in America, no obvious path to realize this desire. One night, in the quiet of my small room, I applied what I then understood of imaginative power. Rather than speaking my wish to others or even formulating it in words within my own mind, I simply assumed the feeling of being in New York City. I felt the cool air of a New York autumn compared to the tropical climate I knew. I felt the solidity of pavement beneath my feet rather than the familiar island soil. I heard the unique cacophony of New York traffic replacing the sounds of my island home. I maintained complete silence about this inner work. I told no one of my desire to travel to America, nor of my imaginative practice. Indeed, I scarcely acknowledged it consciously to myself after that night, returning to my daily routine without anxious attention to my manifestation. Within weeks, I began noticing unusual signs. A newspaper article about New York appeared prominently, though I had never sought such information. A distant acquaintance of my family mentioned their connection to someone in the shipping industry. Small sums of money came to me through unexpected channels. Had I discussed these signs with others, they would have seemed insignificant, coincidental. Had I analyzed them anxiously, trying to construct a logical bridge between these occurrences and my desired travel, I might have dismissed them as insufficient. But in my silence, I simply observed them with quiet interest, neither doubting nor attaching excessive significance to them. The signs accumulated. The seemingly disconnected events formed a pattern that in retrospect was leading unnervingly toward the fulfill my desire. Within months, through a series of circumstances that appeared miraculous from the outside, but that I recognized as the natural unfoldment of my assumption, I found myself aboard a ship bound for New York, all obstacles having been dissolved through no conscious effort of my own. This experience and countless others in my life and in the lives of those who have applied these principles has convinced me beyond any doubt of the created power of consciousness and the crucial role of silence in allowing that power to express freely. The signs of manifestation are always present for those with eyes to see and the wisdom to remain silent as the seed of assumption grows to fruition. These signs are not coincidences, not random events, but the logical, lawful unfoldment of the creative process initiated in consciousness. My friends, as we approach the conclusion of our discussion, let me emphasize more staying silent the fire soil in which your manifestations grow most vigorously. External silence, refraining from discussion of your desires and practices, protects the delicate seed of assumption from the potentially withering effect of contradiction and doubt from others. Internal silence, refusing to engage with your own questioning thoughts, maintains the integrity of your assumption until it manifests as objective fact. In this dual silence, you will indeed start seeing manifestation signs everywhere. The entire universe will rearrange itself to reflect the truth of what you have accepted in consciousness. These signs are not the fulfillment itself, but the shadows cast by the approaching manifestation as it moves from the realm of imagination into physical expression. Learn to recognize these signs without breaking your silence to discuss them. Acknowledge them privately as confirmation of your creative power. Then continue in the calm assumption of your wish fulfilled. The science will multiply and intensify until the full manifestation stands before you as accomplished fact. Remember always, your consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being, you must become in the silence of pure assumption, undisturbed by external discussion or internal contradiction. This creative process proceeds with perfect precision according to law. I challenge you to test this principle in your own experience. Select a desire, perhaps something that has thus far eluded your attempts at manifestation. Formulate clearly in your mind the state you wish to attain. Then, in a moment of quiet relaxation, assume the feeling of already having realized this state. Feel the naturalness of it, the reality of it, until the assumption carries the conviction of reality. Then maintain your silence, both external and internal. Tell no one of what you have done. Do not analyze the process or look anxiously for results. Simply live from the assumption that what you have imagined is already fact. Watch with alert but detached interest as the signs begin to appear in your world. Note them, acknowledge them privately, then continue in your calm assumption. The signs will increase in frequency and relevance, constructing the bridge of incidents that leads inevitably to your manifestation's complete expression in reality. This is the law, and it operates with mathematical precision for anyone who applies it correctly. The silence you maintain is not inaction, but the most profound form of action. The deliberate focusing of creative power without dissipation through speech or doubt. In this silence, you participate consciously in the divine creative process that is your birthright. You experience yourself as God in action, as the imagining power that shapes reality itself. There's no higher calling, no more worthy endeavor than this conscious cooperation with the creative principle of the universe. So I say to you with all the conviction of my being, stay silent and you will indeed see manifestation signs everywhere. Signs that confirm your true identity as the operant power of the universe. Signs that validate your direct participation in the creation of your reality. Signs that herald the imminent expression of your assumption as concrete fact in your world. The signs are the shadows cast by your approaching manifestation. The fulfillment itself, the complete expression of your assumption in physical reality, follows the signs with the same certainty that the body follows the shadow, that the object follows its reflection. In faithful silence, observe these signs with gratitude and continuing confidence in the perfect operation of the law. Then when your manifestation stands before you as accomplished fact, you may speak of it if you wish, not as something gained through technique or effort, but as the natural expression of what you have been conscious of being. This is the mystery and the glory of your creative nature. This is the practical application of the highest spiritual truth. This is the law that sets you free from limitation and reveals you to yourself as the divine creative power in expression. Stay silent. Watch for the signs. And know beyond all doubt that what you have assumed in consciousness must manifest in your experience. It is done.